Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today, we're going to do a fall movie preview for the fall of 2019. We're going to walk through the bigger films that are coming out over the next few months, September, October, maybe midway through November. We're going to focus mostly on films that we think are going to open up over $10 million opening weekend. Now, there are a lot of art films getting released now. Venice happened, Telluride happened, Toronto Film Festival is going on this weekend. So there's tons of buzz about these art films. So if we do think one of those is going to break out, we'll talk about it the weekend that it does open in theaters. But we are going to focus on the bigger films and just see how well we think they're going to do. It's a little bit of a guessing game. The first kickoff weekend here that we're going to talk about is September 6th this weekend. I'm recording this on Saturday. As of right now, It Chapter 2 is doing pretty well. I think going into this weekend, everybody thought it's been kind of a dry spell at the box office, which is par for the course at the end of August. Everybody's going back to school. Colleges are back in session. People are coming back from vacation and getting sort of transitioning into fall. It's very quiet at the box office. So usually we have a kickoff movie in September that makes a fair amount of money. Now, It, back in 2017, was a huge grand slam, the biggest horror movie opening ever. I remember the hype leading up to it and thinking, oh man, this is going to do like really well. But I was thinking more like 70s, 80s was kind of the best it was going to do. The fact that it did $123 million in September, which is usually like the quietest or second quietest month of the year, was pretty astounding. And so with the sequel opening this weekend, really kicking off the fall season, the thought process here is that like, okay, the first was super hyped. All these people wanted to go see it. The reaction was pretty good from what I remember, B+ cinema score. This one is doing okay. Now, again, it's the middle of the day on Saturday, so the numbers aren't complete at all. But we do have a decent picture of how it's going to play out. It is not going to match the 123 of the original. There's no way in hell that's going to happen right now. What is happening is it's a little bit lower. You're looking at almost about $90 million. And what essentially happened was last night, the numbers are looking really good for Chapter 2. Should have been able to push into $100 million, low 100s. But it sounds like the later showings, because I think of the runtime of the film, which pushes almost 3 hours, just they couldn't play later shows or something like that happened, and all the numbers kind of collapsed. And I don't know if I don't think it's bad word of mouth, because it does have a cinema score of B+, just like the original 2017 It. So that's not what's happening here. In any event, it's opening a little bit depressed, but it is really the kickoff here to the fall movie season, and almost like the Halloween movie season, if you could call it that. So It Chapter 2 is doing okay. If it opens up at 90, which is what it looks like it's going to do, 90, 92, 95, somewhere in that range, the guess there is probably like low 200s, 220. It's a sequel. It's going to be front loaded. We've already seen it be front loaded with the Thursday previews now, with the Friday and Saturday numbers coming in. So it's going to do well. It didn't cost a ton of money to make. I think it was $70 million. So it's going to be a win for Warner Brothers. Might really have a big international audience too on this one. So it's definitely a win for Warner Brothers and New Line, and a win for the horror genre at large. I mean, we're going to have that's like the third movie maybe to open over $70 million, $80 million as a horror film in the last few years. The Halloween opened up at like 77, 80, something like that. So it's huge for the horror genre. As a horror movie fan, I'm ecstatic that rated R horror movies are opening over $50 million. The line for success for those films for a long time, like the last 20 years or so, was like if it hit $100 million domestically, that was huge for a horror film, because they were shot for, so little money. Now, the original, I think, was shot for like $40 million. It ended up making, $300 million plus just domestically. So, I mean, they were just printing money on that movie. I think it's going to be not nearly as big of a win as the original It Chapter 2, but I do think it's still going to be quite profitable for Warner Brothers, and it's not really going to hurt the sort of horror movie genre at large. I think we're still going to see a ton more big budget horror films coming out over the next few years because of the success of both of these It films. But that's the biggest thing coming out this weekend on the 6th. And then the weekend after, we have two films opening up that are wide releases, The Goldfinch and Hustlers. Well, let's start with The Goldfinch. So this is based on a novel, I think a pretty big novel that came out in 2013. I mean, I can't really describe it all that much without being like really spoilery. It's just about a young guy who loses his mother and kind of his life after that. So it has this built-in audience. It's a John Crowley film. This is coming out from, it looks like Amazon Studios and Color Force. I don't know Color Force, but Amazon Studios is backing this. It did premiere, or is going to premiere at TIFF, looks like tomorrow, which is Sunday the 8th. This one, in terms of like, and how I'm going to do this is there's a couple different sources that we can look at for projections that are outside tracking. Box Office Pro is okay. They can give us a ballpark. I don't trust them all that much for like within like $5 million, but like they kind of like, is it 20s or 30s or teens? They kind of get us in that range. Then I also look at Hollywood Stock Exchange and see what the price is, and I can sort of use that price to gauge what I think opening weekend will do. So Goldfinch right now, it opens next weekend, a week from now. Box Office Pro has it at $8 million opening, closing out at 25. That seems pretty low to me. The Hollywood Stock Exchange price is listing it at 27, which equates to essentially about a $10 million opening, somewhere around there. So they're pretty close, between 8 and 10. Going into the autumn here, I thought this would be a much bigger film. The trailer, I think, is pretty decent. It has this built-in book audience. I don't really know how big the book was. It's got a great cast. Ansel Elgort, Sarah Paulson, Luke Wilson, Jeffrey Wright, Nicole Kidman. I mean, really some A-listers here showing up for this. And I don't know what happened here. Maybe Amazon has sort of screwed up this release. The budget was $40 million for this. It was very high for a movie like this. Roger Deakins does the cinematography. Come on, folks, let's show up. So production company was Amazon, but it's going to be distributed by Warner Brothers. So it does have that sort of mass market wide release going on. I don't know what's happening here. I feel like people are lowballing it. I don't see it as a 10 to 8. I see it more as like a $14-15 million opening with a nice strong multiplier. So like I would say, 45-ish. Maybe I'm like way off on this, but it feels like because it has these major players involved and it has a built-in audience, I do feel like it's going to do better than what people are projecting. So I would say, and I should probably keep track of all of my guesses, I'm going to say it opens up at 14 and closes out at 45 is what is going to be my official guess for the Goldfinch. And I'm mostly basing that on the fact that it was a big novel and you do have a major studio distributing it. So I think it's going to have those shoulders to stand on to have a decent wide release. I don't see it as a single digit opening weekend. I just don't. Okay, let's move on to Hustlers, which is also opening up on September 13th. This is the J-Lo movie about a group of, I guess they're strippers. I don't think that they're prostitutes. I don't know. I can't really tell from the trailer. But this one could be pretty big. Produced by Will Ferrell, Adam McKay. It's those guys. Constance Wu, Jennifer Lopez are the leads. Lizzo is also in it. Cardi B's in it. This is the Gloria Sanchez Productions, Annapurna Pictures. How does Annapurna get into this as well with SDX? It's so bizarre. So SDX is, it's one of those companies that is a newer studio, had a ton of money, thought they could come in and sort of revolutionize the movie production business. If you're fascinated by that world at all, film production, distribution, and financing, do check out the SDX essay on SDX in the New Yorker. A really great profile came out, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, but it goes in depth into how SDX was created, what their goals are. They really are a fascinating company. They're trying to do stuff differently. It has not gone very well, though. They have a lot of strikeouts, a single here and there, but never, like Bad Moms, I guess, was their only real big home run. But besides that, they kind of had a spotty track record now. I think Hustlers is going to be big for them, though. There's tons of hype on this. It is premiering this weekend at the Toronto Film Festival. It's looking great. Low budget, only $20 to $30 million is sort of the estimate on the budget here. You have a strong producer group of people behind this film. I think it's going to do pretty well. So the guesses right now, Hollywood Stock Exchange has it listed as a $20 million opening. Box Office Pro has it at 28.5. Those are actually pretty big differences. And the real question here is, do we think that this breaks the $20 million opening? I do think it's gonna break that. Is it going to be closer to 30 or closer to 20 is the big question. The wild card here is STX. You just don't know how well they market their films. Sometimes they do a good job of it, like The Upside. I think they did a really good job of that. And I have seen a ton of ads for this, and it does feel very hyped. But we'll wait to see what the reactions are this weekend. Actually, I think it's today when it premieres in Toronto. But I think those guesses are in the right range. I would say more like a $25 million. You know what? Actually, my gut is telling me to go a different way. That's what I love with the box office. It's kind of like reading the weather. There's so many different factors in play. You just don't know what's going to push, something this way or that way. It could be a $17 million opening. It could be a $40 million, but you just don't know. I'm going to go on a limb here and think this breaks out pretty significantly. I'm going to call a $32 million opening on this. I think it's going to be another big hit to sort of match The Upside this year for STX. I think they're going to have a pretty good year with this one. So I'm going to say $32 million opening weekend, and then probably closes out pretty high. I want to say at like $90 million bucks. And this is kind of an outlier to what these other people are saying, but there's just something about, I think J-Lo, Constance Wu is phenomenal. And I think that it's really going to capture something. I think it's probably on some level a woman empowerment movie. And I just think that right now, those types of films are playing very well. So I think it's going to be a big winner for STX and open up. Our next up is going to be Ad Astra on the 20th. This is the Brad Pitt science fiction movie. Tom Lee Jones is in it. The plot line here is something terrible's happening on Earth. Brad Pitt's an astronaut. His father was an astronaut. His father went on some mission, is considered lost, sort of off in space. And I think Brad Pitt has to go find him or find out what happened to him or something like that. It looks really fascinating. It's from Plan B, 20th Century Fox. Plan B is Brad Pitt production company, along with Jennifer Aniston. I think she's still involved in it. So it is also a 20th Century Fox movie. It's going to be distributed by Walt Disney because they own 20th Century Fox now, which is just so bizarre to even think about. Director here is James Gray. He did that movie Lost City of Z, which apparently was like fantastic, but nobody saw back in 2017. I kept seeing it pop up over and over again. Like, oh, you got to see this movie, but like nobody saw it. I think I've seen like 5 minutes of it, but it looks really interesting. So he's an interesting director, interesting story. Bigger cast here. Liv Tyler's also in it. Donald Sutherland. What is this thing gonna do? I mean, I have no clue with these movies. This seems almost like an October release, by the way, like an early October release. It's not that far off, 2 weeks earlier. Hollywood Stock Exchange is saying $20 million opening. Box Office Pro is saying 18, closing out in the 50s essentially. That feels safe to me. The question is, does this break out? I don't think it's going to be massive. I don't think it's going to open at like 30 or $40 million, anything like that. I do see it as kind of a quieter film, like both of these projections are shooting for here. I kind of feel it's going to be depressed a little bit more from the 18. I see more like a $15 million opening, but a really strong multiplier that gets it past 3x and closes out at 50. The reason I say that is I don't know what the quality of the film is. Fox is in a weird place, obviously, because now they're owned by Disney. Is Disney really going to push this or not? Is Brad Pitt really a pull? Is Tommy Lee Jones really a pull? The director has the ability, obviously, to make a really fantastic film. A film that's also maybe kind of stretches people's perceptions about space and time. And so it's a thinking person's film. It seems like, at least. It could be a complete train wreck. Who knows? That's why I think it's going to be, and September's not big on films. I think Hustler is going to do really well. It's going to drown out the space a little bit. So I'm seeing $15 million opening and closes out at $50 million domestically for Ad Astra. Next is going to be Rambo Last Blood. This one is, I don't know what it is, the 100th Rambo film. I don't think he's done one since 2008 though, so it's been a good 10 years in some. He looks so old in this, but this actually does not look that bad. This looks sort of fun. I saw the last one in the theater. I was like, yeah, that was a good time. You know what you're getting with Rambo. What's so bizarre about the Rambo series is like the first film, because it's called First Blood, is so different than the rest of them. The first one's like actually a really good like film. It's not just like an action movie. The rest of them are just like over the top action films that are cool genre flicks. But the first one's like kind of like even like higher art, you could say. This one's definitely not that. This is a typical action movie. His niece gets kidnapped and taken down to Mexico by a cartel. He's got to go save her. He goes to war with the cartel, blah, blah, blah. Opening weekend is looking like 15 on Hollywood Stock Exchange. Box Office Pro saying 22. Those seem about right to me. It's opening up opposite Ad Astra. Goldfinch Hustler is probably not going to hurt that. It in the third weekend is sort of competing with Rambo here. Those numbers seem right to me. I see more like a $17 million opening. And I don't know if the multiplier is going to be all that high. I think the main audience for this is going to be older men. 17 times 3 gets you about 51. I would say 17 million and about a $45 million total take. I just don't think it's going to have long legs at all. But Sylvester Stallone, it does look like a good film. It doesn't look like a throwaway cash grab at all. It doesn't look cheap. Lionsgate's putting it out. Adrian Grunberg is the director. I'm sure Sylvester Stallone had a very strong hand in all of this. The Mexican cartel angle, I don't know. I'm not super into that. It's a really weird time to put that out. But I think it's going to do pretty well. So I'm going to say 17 opens, closes out at 15. The 20th is going to be Downton Abbey, the movie. This is obviously the big TV show that aired from, was it 2010 to the end of 2015, I think. So it's been a good 3-4 years since the series ended. I remember just being so massive, especially in Britain. But it's also big over here. This one's coming out from Focus Features, which is a sub imprint of Universal Comcast, whatever they're called now, some huge conglomerate. I have no clue what this is going to do. So HSX is saying $13-14 million opening. Box Office Pro is saying 18. I don't get the point of doing this film. It seems like a direct-to-streaming play. Why is this not on Netflix or like Amazon Prime, whoever carried the original series, or BBC? I think maybe did they do that? It just seems like a very like big mistake to put this movie out. And they're also kind of dumping it in September is obviously not a strong month. Kind of dumping it here opposite Rambo and Ad Astra. Just seems like a really weird time to put this thing out, even to make it at all, really. And try and put it out as a wide release. It's just, I find it kind of bizarre. So $18 million seems way too high for opening weekend. I'm thinking more single digits on this. I'm thinking maybe $8 million. That even kind of seems high to me. I'm going way below projections here. I'm saying $8 million opening weekend, probably closes out somewhere. It's not going to have a high multiplier, right? 3x multiplier would put it at 24. I think it actually goes a little below that, like a $21 million domestic run. I just don't see an audience here for it. Obviously the people who love the series, but then you have these like Veronica Mars did a movie that I think they did try to wide release that. Didn't do very well. I just don't think there's a lot. If I can watch something on TV and I'm used to watching the series on TV, why am I going to go out to the theater and see the movie and pay $15 to see it? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me what this product or film is all about and who they think the audience is going to show up for this. So I don't see an $18 million opening. They're saying it's going to close out at 40. I think it closes out like half that at 21. I just don't think this is going to do very well at all. Next we have up Abominable. This is an animated film, a joint release from Pearl Studio in China and Universal here in the US. It's essentially about a young Chinese girl in Shanghai who finds a Yeti on her roof, and they want to bring her back home to the highest point on Earth, which is Mount Everest. It seems kind of fun. I think it's from the same sort of group, DreamWorks, as How to Train Your Dragon, so it has that feel to it. A very warm, very nice, soft film for families to go see with each other. Is it going to be good? The thing about animated films is you'll have your Secret Life of Pets, which was not a very good film. And we could see that by the poor performance of the sequel. People did not like the original that much, but it made a ton of money, the original did. But for the most part, that's sort of the exception to the rule. For the most part, animated films have to be very high quality to get a whole family to go out and see it, to have parents plop down, $100 to take their whole family to see a movie. Otherwise, they just watch Disney Plus, which launches in 2 months, by the way. So it's going to have to be very good to break out. The current projections for Abominable are opens at 22. Box Office Pro says opens at 23. So right in line, says HSX. That seems about right to me. I would say low 20s would be a very good guess. I think it goes a little higher than that to like the 25 range. I'm going to say 26 on this. And it looks like a pretty good film based on the trailer. Also, it's going to do fantastic worldwide, and especially in China. But I think, a baseline of a 3x multiplier, so 78. I think it goes a little higher. I think this has a really nice run and hits $90 million here domestically. And who knows what it does in China? Probably a lot more. But I think it's going to be a good run. There isn't a lot of other children's films, bigger children's films that are out in September in this run of September. So I think it's got a big runway to make some real cash. Next up, we have a real doozy here. Joker comes out on October 4th. This is the Todd Phillips directed, Joaquin Phoenix starring standalone. People don't think much of them. It has a weird subplot with a lot that's going on in American culture, especially with young men. So I think for a lot of film reviewers, it's already been out, or it's already premiered at Venice, and they got, rave reviews from a lot of film critics. But there's also this big concern with Joker that it may not be the right film for right now, and maybe that seems unfair. But ultimately, it's going to be a very powerful film. And I don't know if the message that it's sort of permeating out to culture is perhaps the best one to put out there right now. But that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about what's going to do at the box office. It's a notorious film already, is essentially what's happening. Box Office Pro has it opening at 100. HSX has it opening at 61. Huge difference there between the two. I think it's probably going to be closer towards the $100 million. There's a pent up hype for this that I've not seen for any other movie coming out really this fall. It's been on people's radars for forever. The memes are like non-existent online about this film. That once you get the meme cycle going on a film, 6 months before it's released, it's going to be probably a pretty big film. So I'm leaning closer towards maybe like $80 million for this one. And apparently it's very good according to reviews. So it's going to have a good multiplier. So I would say probably 230 domestic. It's going to be a massive film. It's going to be one of the biggest films, if not the biggest film this fall. It will sort of strike an odd chord, I think, with audiences. I do wonder, what's the male to female ratio breakdown going to be in opening weekend? The average film is about 53% male, 47% female audience. This one feels like it's going to be like 16% men, 40% women. It feels it's going to be really slanted that way. I don't hear a lot of women very excited for this film, just because there's this political undercurrent to the character. I feel like a lot of the times the Joker in this version of the film is called an incel. If you don't know what that is, look it up. So I don't know. There's a lot of political and cultural baggage with this film, and so I do wonder if that's going to hurt the box office, or if it's going to help the box office because it's so notorious, so infamous on some level. I think it's going to do pretty well. I don't see, it looks like a very high quality film. The hype is there. Warner Bros. Is going to do the hard push on this. So I see $80 million opening weekend, 230 domestic final. All right. So we do think Joker's going to do pretty well. What about Gemini Man on October 11th, the weekend after? This is the Ang Lee directed film with Will Smith starring himself in two different roles, his young version and older version. Essentially, he's like an assassin, and I think they want to replace him, so they clone a younger version of him, and they end up fighting each other. I don't know. It seems pretty cool. Ang Lee's a great director. This is coming out from Paramount. Paramount's had a brutal year, brutal summer. So I don't, you got Clive Owen involved. You got Benedict Wong, who we love. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is also fantastic. Jerry Bruckheimer produced, so that group of people producing it here. I think co-production actually with China. So it's got some good money behind it. I don't know. I don't know. What was Ang Lee's last movie? Was it Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, I believe, which was a total massive flop, wasn't it? The trailer on this one looks okay. It seems everything about this seems dated. It seems dated that we have Will Smith, who's still trying to be like this A-list movie star like he was 15 years ago. And he still is A-list, but like I thought he would shift to more movies like Focus, where it's a little bit less action and a little bit more sort of like thought-provoking thriller comedy type stuff. Just away from the action type movies. But ain't long. Yeah, this last movie was Billy Long's Long Halftime Walk, Life of Pi, Taking Woodstock. He kind of had a weird career over the last 15 years. Brokeback Mountain is probably his most well-known film. He did The Hulk. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was his breakout film here in the U.S. at least. And Gemini Man seems like it's going to do okay. Right now, the guesses are $44 million from Hollywood Stock Exchange for opening weekend, 28 from Box Office Pro. I'm leaning more towards the Box Office Pro range. I think high 20s is what this is going to do. Paramount's just in a really rough spot. I don't know why their films aren't doing that well. It might be a quality issue, but also might be a marketing issue. Are they marketing Gemini Man appropriately? I've seen a couple of trailers for it, but not a ton. And those trailers do seem a little bit tired and old, like they're from the 90s. So I don't think young people are going to rush out to see this movie just because it features Will Smith. So I'm going to guess, I'm going to kind of be right in line with Box Office Pro. I'm going to say $27 million opening weekend for Gemini Man. And I think, depending on the quality, Ang Lee's a pretty good director overall. He doesn't really go too wrong many places. So 3x multiplier is 81. I kind of give it a $75 million domestic run for Gemini Man, which is an okay performance. I think it's the best that you could really hope for from a movie like this. Okay, let's talk about Jexi next. Also coming out on the 11th, along with Gemini Man. This one looks like a little smaller film from CBS Films. It's essentially kind of like a more comedic Her. Adam Devine stars in it. Basically, he gets a phone. The assistant kind of rules his life, just kind of like Her. And basically, his virtual assistant becomes a kind of crazy girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, whatever you want to call it. It looks pretty funny. CBS Films, I believe this is their last film they're putting out theatrically ever. So end of an era for them. Writer-director, I believe, of Bad Moms. Also maybe one of the writers of The Hangover. So it's got a good pedigree in terms of the comedic writing and directing here. The trailer looks pretty good. I don't know if there's a huge audience for a movie like this. This seems like a film that would have done a lot better 10, 15, 20 years ago. Kind of in the same way Gemini Man feels dated. This one feels pretty dated. It seems like a movie, minus the smartphone angle to it, that would have come out in like 2003, 2004, that sort of time period. The real question is, are the young people going to show up for this? Maybe, Adam Devine's got the following from Workaholics. Right now it's looking like a $12 million opening from HSX, $9 million opening from Box Office Pro. That seems in the right ballpark overall. I think it's going to do a little bit better than that. I'm going to say about $14 million opening here for Jexi, just because the trailer is really funny. It has a lot of jokes that land. Multiplier on this probably won't be too massive. Let's say $35 million total domestic. I'm pretty bullish this fall. Are these films going to do all this well? The only one I'm like super down on is like Down Abbey. I just don't think it's going to do very well. Maybe Gemini Man, I guess a little bit down on. But everything else I'm kind of like over predicting. So I tend to do that in general. But I think Jexi is going to do pretty well. $14 million opening weekend, closes out at $35 million for the comedy. Also on the 18th, we have Maleficent, Mistress of Evil coming out, which is the sequel to the original Maleficent, which came out in 2014, I believe. That opened up at $69 million unadjusted. That's a huge opening for a movie like this. This is from Disney. And Angelina Jolie's in this, Michelle Pfeiffer. This one right now is looking at $53 million from HSX, 37 from Box Office Pro. I'm feeling a depressed release here. Disney has a really odd track record with sequels like this. I'm thinking like the Alice in Wonderland sequel, which was an absolute disaster at the box office. I have a feeling that Maleficent, Mistress of Evil is going to be pretty similar to that. I see it opening actually in the maybe low 30s, maybe $32 million, probably a decent multiplier. Let's put it at $95 million domestic. I just don't feel like there's a great market for this right now. Also, I don't know, like what's going to get families to go out to see movies this fall. You You have Abominable on the 27th. That's kind of it for bigger films. So maybe it uses that vacuum to make a little bit more money. But I see it as a pretty depressed opening and run for Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. One film I think I got the release date a little bit wrong on here. On my list, it has it open on the 18th. I think it's actually opening on the 11th, is The Addams Family. This is the 3D animated film. So there will be another children's film to compete with Maleficent the weekend before. Addams Family is coming out from United Artists Releasing, who we know has an extremely spotty track record this year. They've failed a couple of big movies, Child's Play, Booksmart, to name a couple. They just don't, for whatever reason, it's a joint venture between MGM. MGM is the production studio here. But United Artists Releasing is MGM and Annapurna, and they just have not had great success releasing films. This does not look like it's going to do very well. So it does come out on the 11th, the weekend before Maleficent. So right now, Hollywood Stock Exchange has $24 million as the opening, closing at 64-ish, 65-ish. Box Office Pro has it opening at 18, closing at 70. Maybe I think Abominable is going to take up this audience, and they're not going to go again to see this movie a few weeks later. So I'm thinking more like $15 million opening. It is a children's film, though. I'm second thoughts here. Yeah, I'm going to stick with $13 million and closes out at 45. Just give it a 3x multiplier. I don't think that they're going to be able to market this film well. They haven't shown that they can do that for other films this year. And despite the fact that like 3D animation children's films tend to just have a built-in audience, I don't see them showing up for this one. So I think it's going to do quite poorly and close out around $45 to $50 million domestically for Addams Family. Also opening up on October 18th is going to be Zombieland 2 Double Tap. This is the sequel to the 2009 Zombieland movie. The original opened up at 24, closed out at 75. That is forever ago. It feels like 10 years ago. So most of the cast is back on this one. The big question I have here, and I think a reaction to a lot of the trailer and stuff, is why now? Why are you doing a sequel? A sequel would have made sense for this in like 2011, 2012, but after that point, it doesn't make a whole lot of financial sense to put this movie out. Maybe it does well, but zombies are so played out now. Like Walking Dead has collapsed. But remember, the original premiered before Walking Dead was even a TV series, which premiered in October 2010. And so we've gone to this whole sort of bust or boom and bust cycle of the zombie world stuff. I just don't think this is going to do very well. Hollywood Stock Exchange has it at 29 opening. Box Office Pro has it at 30, so very close. I don't think it's going to get anywhere close to that. I think low 20s. I'm going to go with $21 million opening for this. And it's also a sequel, so low legs. Double would be $42 million, 2x. Triple would be like 63. I put it at like $55 million domestic take. I just don't feel like there's an appetite for this film or for a sequel to this film now. I do think there was one back in, like I said, 11, 12, somewhere in that range. But now it's just like there's no point in putting out a movie like this. So I just don't think it's going to do very well at all. So I think it's going to close out under $60 million domestically for Zombieland 2 Double Tap. On to November, we have Terminator Dark Fate. This is the sixth Terminator movie that has come out. So obviously the original two are classics, the Terminator 1984 and Terminator 2 Judgment Day in 1991. I think both of equal importance, both just classic sci-fi action films. The three subsequent movies are not great. Terminator 3 came out in 2003, opened at 44, closed out at 150 unadjusted. Terminator Salvation came out in 2009, opened at 42, closed out at 125. Terminator Genesis came out in 2015, so the most recent film, that opened at 27, closed out at 89. So none of those films have been able to recreate the magic or success of the first two films. This one, Dark Fate, the director here is Tim Miller. You might recognize him from Deadpool. So he did not sign on for Deadpool 2. He ended up, I think, going to this film instead. James Cameron's coming back as the producer. And then we have, Linda Hamilton, Arnold Schwarzenegger, a really great up-and-coming actor, Mackenzie Davis. She's fantastic. She was really good in *Halt, Catch Fire*, if you haven't seen that TV show. Very uneven, but she was amazing in it. This could, I don't know, I have a hard time thinking that this is going to do all that well. Here's the reason. The trailer looks kind of cool, but it looks like those other later Terminator films, like Genesis, Salvation, Rise of the Machines. It just doesn't feel like it has that spark or magic of the first two. And that's just almost impossible to recreate. So I don't know why they keep trying to do it. Apparently this is going to be part of a trilogy. Terminator 2 and 3 are going to come out in 2017, 2018. I don't know if those are always greenlit. I'm not really sure what the thinking is there. But this is, I don't know. I just don't have a great feeling about Dark Fate and how it's going to do. I don't think there's a great younger audience for this. For people like me who are in their mid to late 30s, the Terminator series is just foundational. It's foundational film. And so I will probably see this, but I can't imagine what somebody under the age of 25 thinks about the Terminator series. They might have seen the originals, but they probably have seen the more recent films, and they're not great. So right now, Hollywood Stock Exchange has this open up at 35, closing out at about 100. Box Office Pro says 38, closing out at 85. Those seem like decent numbers to me, good guesses. My gut says this is going to go lower than that. My gut says 25 opening, which is really sad because you have everybody involved. You have Mackenzie Davis, who I think is just going to be a huge movie star for a very long time, playing one of the leads here. I just maybe this has like the Halloween nostalgia sort of passion behind it, which that movie did so well last fall with the Jamie Lee Curtis coming back in her lead role. And maybe there's the same thing going on here with Linda Hamilton. I just don't feel it, though. I don't feel it at all. Great director, though. So I'm going to say this thing flops. $25 million. I think it might have a decent multiplier and do like $75 million total domestic. But I don't think we're going to get any more Terminator films. And I don't think we need any more Terminator films. The first two are good enough to just live in history and have that be that. The weekend after Terminator, we have a pretty big weekend. Dr. Sleep opens up on the 8th of November. This is the sequel to The Shining. Stephen King wrote a novel sequel that came out in 2013. This is the movie version, directed by Mike Flanagan. You might know him from Gerald's Game. He did on Netflix another Stephen King adaptation, but you probably know him from Haunting of Hill House. He was kind of, I guess, the showrunner for that. That was an amazing achievement. One of the better horror TV series I think ever made. And they're actually coming back with another version of that, I believe, next year. So Dr. Sleep stars Ewan McGregor. Rebecca Ferguson is in this as well. This is a big sort of test, I think, for Warner Brothers. This was originally supposed to come out in January 2020, but apparently the results are so good that they've decided to move it up to this really good November 8th slot. Now, a couple of things it has going for. I mean, the fact that Mike Flanagan is involved is a very good sign that this is going to be high quality. The trailer looks great. I saw the trailer first time. I was like, because I didn't know it was a sequel to Shining. I was like, what's going on here? I was a little bit confused by that. But then the second, third watch was like, oh, there's a lot happening here that looks really fascinating. Ewan McGregor is a great actor who always brings a ton to every role that he has. Here he's in the lead. I think that this thing is going to do quite well. Now let's take a look at what the predictions are right now. Hollywood Stock Exchange has it as a $28 million opening. That's insanely low. Box Office Mojo does not have a number for this yet. They kind of do like 8 weeks out. So Dr. Sleep flying a little bit blind here. The things that it's got Mike Flanagan, Ewan McGregor, great trailer so far. To me, it's the Mike Flanagan factor. He did such a fantastic job on Gerald's Game was okay. Some people really like that adaptation. I thought it was kind of like whatever. But Haunting of Hill House is foundational horror TV. I mean, it was so well done. The last episode and kind of how it gets resolved is not amazing, but those first episodes are just so invigorating and enthralling. And I think he really has the horror touch from a director's perspective. I think this is going to do quite well. It's kind of weird though, because you figure it is a horror-ish movie. Not technically like a old school horror movie, but it kind of seems a little bit kind of between like a thriller, like a spiritual thriller almost. It's not like a slasher or anything like that, but it could have opened a week or two before Halloween, I think, and really gotten that Halloween audience. I think what Hollywood Stock Exchange is saying is way too low. I think this thing opens up at like 45 and has a really strong run to, I would say probably $140 million domestically. This is one of my more sort of out there predictions. But I feel like this is, of all the movies that I've gone through so far, this one feels like a breakout success. It has a lot of potential for breakout success. It's not certain, but I think this one's going to do quite well. I just think there's a built-in audience too because of the Stephen King fans. Everybody knows him well, and I think the movie looks like a very high quality film at the end of the day. I think that's what's going to get people to come out and see it. That same weekend, we have Midway. This is the World War II film from Roland Emmerich. You might know him from Independence Day, but maybe even more recently, Independence Day Resurgence. And also Stonewall. He has not had a hit in a long time. I guess White House Down was his last decently performing movie. This one looks, I don't know how this one got funded. $100 million budget. Every person in the world is in this movie. Patrick Wilson, Luke Evans, Aaron Eckhart, Nick Jonas, Mandy Moore, and Dennis Quaid, Woody Harrelson. Is there still an appetite for World War II movies, especially directed by Roland Emmerich? I don't think so. Hollywood Stock Exchange says opens up at 24, closes out around 65, 70. I feel like that's kind of in the ballpark. This thing could really flop and go lower than that. Although you have all these actors and stuff, I feel like for older people, this is definitely going to be a good film for them. But it's the same weekend as Dr. Sleep, the weekend after Terminator Dark Fate. I'm going to go ahead and say this opens up a little bit higher than 24. I'm going to say $27 million on this one and closes at around 55. I don't think that there's a chance for this really to break out all that much. Now, I could be wrong because, World War II is still a draw for baby boomers. And you have that expansive cast of so many different people. The trailer looked like a Roland Emmerich movie. So I don't know. I just don't feel like young people are going to show up. So it's not really going to break out. So I'm going to stick to that, right under $16 million domestic for Midway. One more on the 8th of November is Last Christmas. This is the British rom-com directed by Paul Feig, starring, what's her name? Emily Clarke. You might know her from, of course, Game of Thrones. This is a screenplay by Emma Thompson. I guess it's sort of based on the George Michael. Is that a Wham song or a George Michael song? Last Christmas? I don't even know. In any event, it looks like a kind of paint by numbers rom-com. It is getting a full release. Paul Feig is pretty good with these types of movies. He obviously did Bridesmaids, but had some misses. The Ghostbuster reboot was not very good. Is Emily Clarke a draw? Maybe a little bit. Let's see what Hollywood Stock Exchange is saying on Last Christmas. They're saying opens at 15, closes out in the 40s. That seems somewhat appropriate to me. I do think just because Warner Brothers is putting out, I think it's Warner Brothers, isn't it? Or maybe it's Universal. No, it's Universal. Because they're putting it out, they're probably going to do a full push. It's going to have a lower opening weekend, but again, once we get into the holiday season, this is approaching, obviously, with the title like Last Christmas, I do feel like it's going to have really strong legs. So I kind of agree with the opening in around the mid-teens. I'm going to say it's more like a $17 million opening. No, actually, I'm going to say $16 million opening. But I think it goes on to have some pretty good legs and makes around $55 million. Just holiday films just play forever and ever. So I think as an overall performance, I think it's going to be decent. It's not going to be a flop and it's not going to be a breakout. I think it's going to be right down the middle. The final movie on November 8th to open up here as a wide release is Playing with Fire. This is like a family comedy film from Paramount, and I guess Nickelodeon's involved as well. John Cena is in the main role. Keegan-Michael Key is also in this. John Leguizamo, Judy Greer, who you might know. So this one, I don't know. I don't know what this is. I mean, why? It's like a movie about like kids who become firemen. I don't know. It sounds so stupid and it looks absolutely atrocious. But it is a children's film during this sort of holiday-ish season. HSX has $11 million opening, 31 close-ish, around that zone. That seems way too low even for like what looks like a pretty poor movie to me overall. It's going to open at least 15. I say it opens at like $20 million and closes out at 60 just because it is in the holiday season. And it's one of those movies that looks like a safe movie you can bring your entire family to. And John Cena is funny and John Leguizamo is funny and Judy Greer is awesome. So I think with the full backing from Paramount, Nickelodeon, those organizations, I think it's going to get the right marketing and placement for the ad. So I think it's going to have a little bit of an audience here, but I think 20 million close out at 60. Maybe it breaks out a little bit more. Let me revise that because it's a children's film in the holidays. I'm going to say opens at 20, closes out at 70. So a 3x plus multiplier for Playing with Fire. On to November 15th, 2019. We have Ford versus Ferrari. This should be one of the bigger movies of the fall/holiday season. This stars Matt Damon, Christian Bale, John Bernthal is also in it, Tracy Letts, Josh Lucas. This is a James Mangold film, so you might know him from Logan. He also did Wolverine. He has a really strange sort of directorial history here. He did Copland in 97. That was kind of a bigger film to come out, although I don't think it did all that well. Girl Interrupted. Then like Kate and Leopold. He did Identity, which is an awful film, but then he does Walk the Line, then 3:10 in Yuma, then Night and Day, then Wolverine, then Logan. Kind of just like an odd career for this guy. The buzz on this one's pretty high. Hollywood Stock Exchange has it opening at 30, closing out at 81. Those numbers don't make a whole lot of sense. Like it might open a little bit below that, but it's going to have a phenomenal multiplier just because of the holiday season. And it does seem like it's an award contention film. We don't know if it's very good. This one's coming out from 20th Century Fox via now Walt Disney. So it premiered at Telluride, I guess, about a week ago in some. It does seem like it's pretty good, but is it really going to be the level like a Best Picture nomination, $100 million budget? My guess is here is it does open kind of lower. It's going to be going up Charlie's Angels, which we'll talk about in a bit. I don't think that's going to do all that well. What's coming out before it, that's going to Dr. Sleep probably and maybe Midway take a little bit of this audience, but probably not a ton. It really depends on how much Dr. Sleep breaks out, because if it breaks out a ton, it will definitely depress the opening weekend for Ford and Ferrari on the 15th. So I'm going to go a little bit below what Hollywood Stock Exchange is saying, but I'm saying it's going to do like a 4x, maybe even higher than that. I'm going to do $25 million opening weekend, but 110 total domestic. So over a 4x multiplier for this. It just has that feeling to it, like a prestige film, and can play strong all the way through when the Oscar noms come out, which is first or second week of January in 2020. So I think it's going to be a pretty strong performance for Ford versus Ferrari. Last but not least is Charlie's Angels, also opening up on November 15th. This is another entry into the Charlie's Angels films. We had that reboot series back in the mid-2000s, which did pretty well. This one is directed by Elizabeth Banks. You might know her from a lot of movies. She's a big actress, but she's moved on to directing. She directed Pitch Perfect 2. And so I think with this one, you kind of have to ask yourself, like, how viable of a narrative universe is Charlie's Angels to people under 30 years old? I just don't think it's going to be super popular. I don't think a lot of people will really remember the TV show that much. It started before I was born, and I'm, approaching middle age now. So I don't know. I don't think this is going to do all that well. It doesn't feel like it has a built-in sort of hype to it at all. The one thing it does have going for it, Elizabeth Banks releasing it or directing it is a really good sign. It's probably going to be a high quality film. Kristen Stewart plays a lead, and she's like, A-list movie star now, of course. So it has those things going for it. Sony, Columbia, Flower Films is producing this. That's Drew Barrymore. She was in that reboot part of the series of this Charlie's Angels films. Patrick Stewart shows up. Elizabeth Banks also plays a prominent role in the film. So there are some things going for it. I think it's going to be a decent film. I just don't think that there's a young audience for that. And that's sort of like DOA then. If there's nobody under 25 who really wants to see it, and maybe Kristen Stewart brings out that crowd, but I doubt it. Hollywood Stock Exchange says opens at 27, 28. That seems sort of ballpark. I'm going to go lower and say it opens at $23 million. I think it's going to have an okay multiplier just because of the holiday season. So I see it as like maybe a $70 million domestic film, which is not bad for something like this. Let's see if I can find the production budget on this. No production budget listed. So I think for the expectation here shouldn't be higher than $70 million domestically. There's no reason to expect more out of a film like this. As long as I kept the budget really small and don't overmarket it could make some money for them. But I think conceptually, just not a great idea to bring this series back because the roots of it are just too old. It's 70s, 80s. That's Gen X, older Gen X folks. So like they're not probably going to run out to see this. And if young people aren't going to see it, then it's not going to make a ton of cash. So that's kind of it. Like wow, take a step back. That's a lot of movies. So I think we talked about like 20 movies. So it's a pretty interesting fall. Where are we stacked? Like where are things really sort of taking off? It's kind of up and down. I think obviously It 2 opening up the fall is a big deal. It's looking to make about $90 to $100 million its opening weekend here, which is great. Not really as high as the original, which did 123. So we're off to a good start. I think Hustlers is going to break out a bit, doing the 30s. Then it's kind of quiet for a while until we hit Joker on October 4th. So the rest of September is smaller films, I think, doing decently well, but nothing really breaking out by a lot. I think Joker's going to do fantastic. I just heard that it won the Golden Lion Award at Venice. That's a huge deal for the Joker. So now it's in the Oscar race, and it's probably Joaquin Phoenix is probably in the lead now for Best Actor, which who would have thought? I was saying like a week ago saying that was going to happen, but it did just win that award. So that's now in another echelon of films. So it's like a big, huge art film, and now it's a big like hype film too. So I'm expecting that to open around 80, closing out at 230. I guess to me that is definitely going to be the biggest movie of the fall. I mean, that and It Chapter 2, of course. Everything else through October just seems kind of rough. I don't see anything really breaking out. I don't think the new Terminator movie is going to do very, very well at all. I like Dr. Sleep's chances of breaking out in that early November slot. And then it's kind of just, Midway, Last Christmas, Playing with Fire, Charlie's Angels. I just don't think it's going to do all that well. So it's kind of like, it's almost going to seem a little bit like summer, where there's a lot of stuff coming out, but nothing's really going to do fantastic besides a few films. And my choices are going to be obviously It Chapter 2, Joker, and Dr. Sleep. And I think Ford and Ferrari will do well, but kind of on a longer sort of playing field where it plays all the way through the award season. And then after that, once you get into the holiday season, you get stuff like Frozen 2 coming out on the 22nd, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood on the 22nd, 21 Bridges on the 22nd. Frozen's going to be massive, probably open like 100 million, close out at like 300 million pretty easily. Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I think, is going to do pretty well. Definitely awards film for Tom Hanks. Jumanji, Black Christmas. Oh, another Black Christmas remake. Didn't they just like do a Black Christmas remake like 10 years ago? Anyways, the new Star Wars, obviously on December 20th, Cats, and a lot of other stuff coming out. Little Women, I'll check out for that one. So maybe I'll do like a really quick holiday movie preview once we get closer to Thanksgiving. But that is the fall movie preview, folks. Thank you so much. I will be back every weekend with a review of the top 10 of the box office. This has been the Wildline Podcast.